I'm going to move to a different area. I'm sure you'll be pleased not to talk about industrial action for a bit. I'm going to talk about palliative care. You'll be aware that this committee commissioned an independent expert panel to look into palliative care, and the report wasn't good news. The panel found that as a result of the reliance on charity funding and because there's no minimum service standards in ICBs, the panel found that there's a postcode lottery in provision, with poorer and more marginalised communities often losing out. Is that a picture you recognise?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I just want to be upfront about the fact that one of the things that I'm worried about, particularly in relation to the hospice sector, is that in common with the wider voluntary sector, what we're seeing is not only real pressures in terms of costs, but also the ability to raise money through regular individual giving, which is the bread and butter of so much of the voluntary sector, but particularly this part of the voluntary sector. They're seeing a real impact. The sort of the regular direct debits going down and that sort of thing. And so even with the money that we've put into the hospice sector, and we've had £100 million already for the sector as a whole in capital funding, 80 million revenue funding for the next 3 years with children's hospices, it's really important that we as the public continue to support our hospices. The government's developing a palliative care and end of life.
Just pause.
Yeah, do.
So your line there was just the public need to do more to support palliative care. That doesn't feel like a sustainable model for funding of palliative care. Well,
let me just, I'll come back to that in a second. And about to set out what we want to do with the modern service framework, which is linked to that. I think I've said this before. I am personally uncomfortable with the extent to which the hospice sector is reliant on voluntary donations as opposed to statutory funding. We understand historically why that's been the case and where the hospice movement has grown from, but as someone who has benefited from the hospice sector in terms of end-of-life care for two of my grandparents, both of my grandmothers, over the last 30 years, the service that I saw firsthand and the wider support provided by people like Marie Curie in terms of the hospice at home and the palliative care nurses and teams that go into people's homes, when I look at that, that doesn't feel to me like a nice to have. And it doesn't feel like the kind of, the extra boost that you would expect the charity sector to maybe try and provide to help in the health and care space. It feels like an essential part of a modern health service. But in common with some of the other things we're addressing this morning, there is some distance to travel between where we are and where we want to be. And in loads of those areas, there is a cost attached, and we've got to manage our resources well. And so it's in that context that I say to the public, while I want to be able to do more to help financially the hospice sector, and believe me, if ever I kind of spot some, a capital budget or a capital programme that's underspending towards the end of the financial year, or if there's an opportunity to kind of invest more in hospices, I am like a magpie on this issue and will swoop in and seize any opportunity I can to put more money into hospices. That was one of the reasons we put the 100 million in last year, and I think the 26 million, the 80 million for children's hospices over the next 3 years. The reason we did that was Stephen Kinnock and I were determined to provide that certainty for the children's hospice sector and get away from that kind of, if the money is available, we'll give it to children's hospices. In terms of where we want to be, and as part of that journey towards a better funded hospice sector, we are developing a palliative care and end-of-life care modern service framework for England. That will be aligned with the ambitions set out in the 10-year plan. I can assure you, as and when I'm able to provide more resources for this part of the health and care system and family, I absolutely will do that.
Okay, so I'm now going to go on to workforce within that. So there are currently 78 vacancies for palliative care consultants, or there were when the report was published. That's on top of 132 clinicians expected to leave the profession in the next 5 years. And there are pretty bad training bottlenecks in palliative care particularly. Actually they're getting better, but certainly for the last couple of years. So we've got a workforce crisis here. How close are we to solving it?
So we're working on our workforce plan at the moment. As I said earlier, we are taking a bit more time with that because we want to get it right. This is consistent with the shift we want to see from hospital to community. We want to see more community-based teams. I want people aspiring to a career in the NHS, whether as doctors or nurses or other healthcare professionals. I want them to see the future of the NHS and where the action is and where the excitement is as being in the community, closer to people's homes, in people's homes. I think that particularly applies to palliative and end-of-life care. Jim, I think
just to add to that, going back to the point with the discussion of the BMA, this is part of what we want to try to do with the training system, which again we're in heated agreement on, but try and shift away from a system that prescribes nationally how many slots there are in certain specialties in specific locations, and make it more local, but also try and expand in more community oriented.
Just to pick you up on that point, the problem of the postcode lottery, particularly because there's no minimum service in ICBs, means that we might have to have some form of direction in this in order to make sure that we are fixing that problem.
Yeah. So the MSF will give us more structure to be able to direct more consistency of provision. I had a session with the hospice chief exec yesterday and heard very clearly from them how hard it is to actually continue to function in the current world. She was working with 2 ICBs that had very different approaches as well, which isn't unusual. So we want to try and bring that consistency, as Wes has said, against which we can then hold people to account, and you can start seeing people commission a consistent model. But specifically on the workforce model, if we can reach agreement with the BMA, this would be a specialty you'd expect to see grow over time.
And there is going to be a cultural challenge there. I mean, one BMA representative I spoke to in the context of the additional specialty places said, look, we want to know where these places are. What we don't want is loads more geriatricians in North Wales. You know, notwithstanding the fact that I'm responsible for the NHS in England, I think that kind of demonstrates to an extent where some of the thinking or some of the culture is around future career ambitions. We will need more geriatricians. Community is a good place to be, and declaring interest. I've got family in North Wales. I'd quite like more geriatricians in North Wales, but I'd like them to be everywhere across the country as well.
In North Wales, because I think I want to get to the broader point. So we've got this workforce crisis, and we've got experienced staff leaving. We've got what looks to be a postcode lottery in provision. We also have the terminally ill adults end of life bill coming down the pipe, which has an auto-commencement clause after 4 years, whatever the state of social care. As Health Secretary, do you think it's safe to pass legislation with auto-commencement in it after 4 years against this backdrop?
That is a decision for Parliament.
As Health Secretary, do you think it's safe?
The government is neutral on the...
I appreciate that the government is neutral. I'm not asking you whether you think what you think we should do. Do you have safety concerns?
I would like to make sure that were Parliament minded to proceed with the bill and see it through to completion and onto the statute books, I would like to make sure that we have high quality palliative end-of-life care services so that there is a real choice and no one feels compelled to take up an assisted death through the absence of palliative and end-of-life care services. That is not where we are as a country at present.
Do you think auto-commencement puts that at risk?
Yes, please, Permanent Secretary, save me from this line of questioning.
As you will be aware, the bill is going through, and we've had 34 amendments from the law sponsor through the committee stage, and it wouldn't be appropriate for us to preempt what is happening in Parliament for very obvious reasons. We will, however, with the Ministry of Justice, ensure that ministers are appropriately briefed on every aspect and every workability aspect of the bill as we proceed and go forward. And I don't think it would be appropriate at this stage to comment.